Thank you.
Well. The same ritual every 3 months. Horrific numbers, even though there may have been declines here and there. And, I think all of you have run out of things to say now, because let's say every 3 months we gather like this, we talk about these numbers, but the situation is hardly improving in real terms. Divya? Divya, do you want to go first? Your take on today's numbers. Okay, we seem to be having a network. Siham, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's generally accepted that South Africa is one of the highest rates of incidents of sexual violence in the world. And the South African Police Services statistics reflect a huge amount, more than 46,000 sexual offences in the reporting period. So SAP statistics, although they indicate a decline in the reported sexual offences over the past period, there's an increase in reported cases in the past 5 years. But despite the increases in reported matters, the conviction rate for all sexual offences remains low and continue to decline, with a mere 7.8% conviction rate for the year 2019-2020, and a further decrease in conviction rate for the year 2020 to 2021. So what does this say? What does it reflect? Is that SAPS, even though the statistics reflect that there's some form of a decrease, we need to be able to look at conviction, and it's very important that SAPS play a supportive as well as good supportive role with regard to the NPA, who has increasingly over the past few years prosecuted fewer and fewer sexual offences cases. And we need to, while the NPA reported conviction rates, which on the surface might look positive, this is unrealistic reflection of the true picture of sexual violence victims, as it only reflects those matters which are actually prosecuted, which means enrolled, proceed to trial, and there's an actual conviction. So we need to be able to look at the statistics within the broader justice crime prevention cluster and see whether or not there's actual convictions and actual change within those particular communities. Mm-hmm. So that is just overall. And the historical context of violence generally in South Africa also finds expression in the specific violence which is perpetrated against women by men. And this you can look at the femicide rates. Okay. And so the context, we need to be able to look at the culture of violence and see how we can turn it around.
Okay. Tamingosi?
Yeah, look, I think there could be a celebration here and there. I mean, statistics have declined in some different, kinds of crime. The worrying thing is with the increased murder rates, who's getting murdered the most? It's women and children. And I think it was said even during the press briefing in itself. And I think one of the major things, I think we need to start having a conversation about the role of policing in our society and whether we have a policing crisis or not. I think we cannot overstep the own issue of detentions that are happening within the police hierarchy, and whether people want to deny it or not, whether the minister and the police commissioner want to deny it or not, it is having a bearing on how SAPS is able to essentially deliver on its mandate and actually fulfill its duty. So the truth of the matter is that we may celebrate some decrease, here and there, but the truth of the matter is that we still have a policing crisis in this country, and the sooner we have a conversation about that, the better. At the backdrop of the expert panel report on public order policing all those years ago, nothing has moved. Mm-hmm. You look at the crime intelligence mess that is there, the murder of the anti-gang unit, comrade in Kena in the Western Cape, You think about Khetla Sitole having to give reasons why he should not be suspended to the president. So that tells you there are serious problems there. You think about the July unrest and how the police, or at least the security, cluster of this country has failed. So the truth of the matter is that we have a policing crisis, and the sooner we get into that conversation, the better. Statistics tells us nothing. I mean, this is just quantifrenia. It's studies in numbers. It's not telling us about the situation that we're seeing on the ground. And the sooner we have a conversation about the realities and the lived realities of South Africans and the little trust that they have in the policing system, the better. So for me, we can debate the numbers all we want, but the truth of the matter is that we need to look at the mess that is within the SAPS, and we need to talk about that. Just recently, the number of police who are committing suicide and committing femicide is on the rise as well. Just yesterday, I was listening to one radio station where they were talking about what are the issues that are actually making, suicide rates to increase in the police. So we have serious problems within the SAPS, and let's leave the numbers aside. Let's talk about the state of policing in this country, the state of policing hierarchy, the intelligence, within the police. It's a mess.
Divya, from your vantage point?
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you for having Save the Children on. I think we are, as Save the Children, we're just very concerned about what we're seeing in terms of the statistics regard to child murders. I think one child killed is one child too many. And to see that continually happening in this country is really worrying. I think also we're a bit concerned about the increase in the number of attempted murders. In some ways, we could say, yes, it's a good thing that those children were not actually killed, but the reality is that the fact that somebody actually tried to kill a child says something about the kind of society we are and how we need to start looking at what we're going to do to address this. Violence has become so normalized in this country, and we really need to look more than beyond just about trying to stop it at a police level. I think we need to also look at what we're doing as a society in general, how we make this violence acceptable in every form, that it ultimately leads to people thinking it's okay to kill children. And when we see an increase in the number of child murders.
And perhaps just to give context there, Divya, I mean, we're talking about, the murder rate against children increased by 22.6% quarter to quarter. Attempted murder, which you also just mentioned, of children increased 30% year on year and 39.2% quarter on quarter. I mean, we can't be living with these numbers. As a nation, this is abnormal.
It is abnormal. It is abnormal, I think, just for anybody to kill somebody else, even adults. But the fact that people could even think about killing children, we've seen incidences, and specific cases in the past where it was parents who were killing children. A couple will have a disagreement. The father will take the children. He'd want to prove a point to his ex-wife or his girlfriend or whoever it was, the mother of the children. So he'll take the children and he'll go off and he'll kill them. That kind of behavior is not acceptable. And so when we're seeing, we don't know the details case by case of what exactly happened in each of those cases. But from Save the Children's side, one child murdered is one child too many. And when you look at the numbers, that is really not on for us.
And Siham, a lot was said around the fact that the rape cases are on the decline, but fact of the matter is that the numbers remain very high. And if you look at the average daily rape rate, it remains very high. So the decline is really not something worth celebrating.
You're correct. But I'm going to link it also to the fact that, in addition to the low conviction rates of matters which are reported to SAPS, and the additional phenomena which is of great concern. So I have to note that the special rapporteur notes the phenomena of underreporting of violence against women matters. And she also states that SAP statistics, which the previous panelists have indicated, released annually, are in no way conclusive of the real prevalence of violence against women and children. And it does not speak to the lived realities of what is happening in communities. And she states that it's unchallenged fact that there is a massive under-reporting of all forms of gender-based violence. So it's already high, but we need to be able to look at the conviction rates as well as the number of reporting. And I think that some of the good things that have come out is, he spoke about the broad legislative and policy framework where the 3 bills that have come through, the GBV bills, which is fairly positive. It strengthens Domestic Violence Act, strengthens Sexual Offences Acts, and it speaks to broader vulnerability of women and children. That is one of the positives that have come out of this speech. In addition to that, he's also spoken about GBV. It's very important to know that the broader justice crime prevention cluster, but even in terms of government, needs to align itself with the national strategic plan against gender-based violence and femicide. And it's important that the reporting is done in that particular context, and we need to be able to work more to be able to see that we change the norm of violence within our communities through bringing in a different value system and culture. Also, those are things that we need to be able to look at. But one of the most significant issues is the actual conviction rates.
One would have thought that the numbers, Tammy was making the point, whom we have just lost for a second. Hopefully we'll be able to get him back. He was talking about us dealing with those issues, the conviction rate, the crisis that we have within the South African Police Service, the tensions, and that's to put it mildly, between the minister and the National Police Commissioner. But the numbers themselves, and in my view, this is where the value, this is where numbers should actually be, getting all of us to move, and not to be comfortable where we are. Just look, if you look purely at the numbers, the rapes, which I was talking about just now, they have increased 11,315 just between October and December. 11,000 people, 11,315 people, were raped. The great majority by far, of course, being women, as a matter of fact. We're talking about more than 900 women murdered between October and December. Now, if those numbers aren't moving us or haven't moved us, what then is going to move us? How do we take this conversation beyond where we have, taken it up until now?
Well, it has been about 3 years since the NSP. And I think it's very important that we collectively respond to what is perceived and what we know is a chronic crisis of gender-based violence. I think we need to be able to be hopeful in terms of the minister at least giving some form of statistics and breakdown of GBV, that there was training of police officers, etc. However, we need to be able to focus on addressing the lack of accountability for those who perpetrate violence against women, individuals, whether or not it's a state or even society overall. And we need to be able to undertake to address the systemic inadequacies that result in levels of vulnerabilities and the lack of safety within our communities. And we need to we need to start insensitizing responses to the needs of victims and people on the ground. We need to continue in terms of the trajectory of what the NSP is telling us, and we need to be able to ensure that within our communities, the statistics, the murder rates, the rape need to decline significantly for us to be able to see any form of substantive equality for women in our communities.
Divya, are we going to be able to get to the stage that CM has just described, or that we should aspire to, if we continue to have these catfights between the people who are supposed to take overall responsibility for the state of policing, for the training that CM was talking about, the accountability. The buck should stop with them, but they are busy with their own catfight.
Yeah, I think it's a very critical point that has been raised about who takes responsibility and who owns the space to make sure that we as a society are safe. First and foremost, ultimately, yes, it is the police responsibility to ensure that there is a sense of safety. One of the things that just concerns us about the statistics also is that even at this point when it gets presented, we hear about child murders, but we don't hear about the other kind of violence that children are experiencing. We don't know about how many children. The stats don't show us how many children were raped. We don't see what effects that is having on children. That doesn't come to the forefront. Children are just left on the sideline. So that's something that's quite important for us. And yes, the police need to take responsibility to up their game in terms of prevention services, to become more visible, to look at how in communities people feel safe. The second thing also I think that we need to really look at, and that's been raised as well, is the issue around, so what happens when people do get caught? Our conviction rate is also a major challenge in this country. So when one looks at what that statistics is of the number of children, or just the number of people that have been murdered, it would be quite interesting to see, so how many convictions have there been in comparison to that? And as a country, if we don't start to look at how we address prevention, but how do we also respond in a way that justice becomes visible, then we see a situation where an increase will continue, because those with criminality in them, the criminal behavior, will feel invincible. They're going to feel that it's okay to continue with that kind of behavior. And so as a society, if we want to feel like we're a society that actually cares for its people, women, children, everybody who just wants to live an honest, decent life, but we don't have that happening around us, we don't have that sense of safety, then we're going to have the situation where we're going to keep going back and forth, pointing fingers as whose fault it is.
Okay, maybe Siham, without necessarily, projecting any blame, but as a matter of fact, we do have a ministry that is responsible for really taking care of, not so much taking care, but really putting the government's focus on, gender-based violence and how it affects women and children. And it was deliberately, located within the presidency, because we were told these matters matter the most to the highest political office in the land. But are we, perhaps without being judgmental, but are we seeing the fruits or the benefits of that arrangement? Has it made, or is it making any difference?
Well, we firstly need to understand, the historical context of violence generally in South Africa, we know finds expression in violence perpetrated against women, mostly by men. And we also need to understand that the violence is normative as a means to resolve conflict, and it finds its roots firstly in apartheid legacy, inequalities, poverty, lack of access to services, marginalization, the militarization of men. There's a range of things. So we need to be able to understand the context. So I do believe that the NSP is currently a strategic guide for departments to be able to work collectively together, to be able to ensure that there's broader accountability in terms of all departments to the presidency. I do believe that the combination of civil society, of labor, of private, as well as government, it's something which has come out of the 2018 summit. And I think it's important that all departments, and I do think that the minister, the statistics might not look good, but as indicated, some of the preventative measures as well as responsive measures in terms of bringing down GBV within our communities. And he spoke about the FCSs, he spoke about the increase of the training of police officers, etc., gender sensitization training, etc. But I think, as the panelist has indicated, the previous one, we need to be able to look at the mental health of police officers. We need to be able to look at, for example, those suicides that he was speaking about, etc. Because also, like our previous panel has indicated, we need to be able to look at the studies in relation to the stats. And a University of the West, Cape Town study showed that 1 out of 5 children report being abused by the age of 17 years. And this might be an underestimation, because we know that there are major challenges with children, etc. So we need to be able to look at what the president signed as the NSP and the purpose of it, and how can we all, in a multi-sectoral way, work towards bringing down the sexual offences or the broader GBV in our communities. Because we know that this NSP centers around accountability, around prevention. And I do believe that the minister at least attempted to respond to his particular pillar, which is pillar 3. And it deals with GBV survivors. It speaks to the criminal justice system, needs to be accessible, and it speaks to strengthening of the broader criminal justice system. So and he spoke also about the amendment of the legislation relating to GBV areas, and also and how it has strengthened some of the bail, etc. Provisions. Okay. So there's a lot that the minister has indicated.
Okay. Divya, as people have been saying all along, as much as everyone is pleased with the strengthening of legislation, for example, in dealing with GBV, as much as we may have a very good plan in place, as much as we may have, an office that is dedicated to, women and children's issues, at the end of the day, legislation is not going to implement itself. At the end of the day, it is the men and women in blue and others who work with them who will have to make a difference they can make. If they are they are not in the right state of mind. They're not trained. They opt for or end up, committing a suicide. And this is a conversation. This is our next conversation with the police unions in a minute. But final thoughts from you.
I'm so glad you raising that point, Vuyo, because there's 2 critical issues in that I want to actually talk to. The first one is relating to the fact that a plan is only as good as how you can enact it. So we need to really look at resources that are put in place against the plan. So is there sufficient budget? What kind of investment is government making to align the activities that need to go to make that plan real? And so that is something we're particularly concerned about. So I'll use an example from a children's perspective. So when we look at, for instance, child rights organizations across the country that work with children who have experienced violence, there's a lot of problems and challenges that they experience when it comes to how they're funded and how much of money is given to them for preventative services against the way government funds them to do more response and aftercare. All of the paperwork that they get caught up in how the funding is designed and how the funding is given to them and how they get monitored and tracked in terms of what they're doing. The second point that I want to raise, which is a very big one, which the children's sector has been asking for a long time, and that is for the Office on the Rights of the Child to be placed back in the presidency. It is wonderful that the Office on the Rights of Women is placed back there. So which means that from a presidency point, from the highest office in the country, a lot of attention is being focused on gender-based violence, but it's not happening with children. There has been commitments, but we're still waiting. And when that was there previously, it was taken away. And it was very disappointing for the children's sector because then it conveyed a very critical message that children were unimportant. And we say, no, children are absolutely important to us. They are the most vulnerable citizens of this country and require additional attention. And therefore, they need the highest office in the country to have them close at hand, to be monitoring and to be looking at what's happening with children. So that call is being made. Let's move the Office of the Rights of the Child back into the presidency, and let's look at the budgets and the funding, fiscal allocation, so that we make these plans real and possible.
Let's hope someone is listening. I believe we do have Tammy, even though we've run out of time. Tammy, technology really giving us problems. But final thoughts from you about how best we can go forward.
Thank you. I think that we need to...
Tammy, sorry. Tammy, are you there?
I apologize. I mean, technology is not our best friend. Look, I think, Vuyo, moving forward, there's two things. One is, it's all good and well for us to amend legislation. It's all good and well for us to make NSPs, for example. But the truth of the matter is, like you have said, like the previous speaker had said, these things are not going to implement themselves. So it's okay. It's all good and well. We may have guidelines. But the truth of the matter is that we need to invest in ensuring that these things actually happen. So we need to resource these things properly. And then secondly, the other thing that we need to do is to try and deal and clean up the mess that is within SAPS. If we're not going to fix the system that's within SAPS, then we must forget about the delivery of all these beautiful plans that we're putting in place. Let's address some of the challenges that are there. Let's make sure that there's psychosocial support for the men and women in blue, to be able to assist, and try and alleviate some of these crimes that are happening. The last point that I would like to make is to say, there needs to be strengthening of relationships between communities and the police. It need not be antagonistic. What we've seen in the past couple of years is necessarily, a relationship where the police and communities are at loggerheads, whether it's through protests and the police are shooting at communities and all sorts of things. We need to democratize and demilitarize the police so that they can have better relations and better collaboration with communities in order for us to be able to see these things to fruition. So the truth of the matter is that we can come up with all the beautiful legislation, we can do everything else that we can do, but it needs collaborative effort, it needs solidarity across all levels of society to ensure that we create a safer society for our children, men, women, and everybody else, and every citizen in this country.
In fact, we'll be talking about those issues, what you call, Tammy, the mess within the SAPS, the psychosocial support that our men and women in blue deserve right now. Those are the issues we'll be canvassing with police unions in a moment. But for now, let me thank all three of you. Tammy Ngosi from the Right to Know organization, Siham Samai from the Women's Legal Center, and Divya Naidu from the organization Save the Children. This conversation continues right after this. Welcome back to the Watchdog as we continue to shine the spotlight this evening on the latest crime statistics released earlier today. And joining us now is Lesiba Tobakale from the South African Police Union and Mpo Kwinika from the Independent Police Union of South Africa. Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks very much for your time. Just your take on the statistics that were released today by the Minister and the National Police Commissioner. Lesiba, you go first.
Thank you so much. Yes, the South African Policing Union, we are indeed concerned because, you know, we represent around 83,000 members of the South African Police Services, and having around 27 police officials being murdered within the period of 3 months, indeed, it's a concerning issue. And further to where you look at the rate of murder, it continues to go high, and even rape itself, though it shows a slight decrease, for the fact that there's still thousands and thousands of cases that are still reported, it is clear that indeed the crime situation within our country, it is not under control, and there need to be measures clearly that are implemented by SABC management and government in order to ensure that the high rate of crime is being dealt with. And further, you know, those type of measures we proposed and we have placed on the table, it includes restructuring. Restructuring, it seeks to take those resources where the structure of SABC is top bloated, to take them and channel them to the district and the police station level, whereby policing, it is happening down there. So we need to have more of those resources there. But the non-implementation of that restructuring agreement that we concluded at the SABC, it really has an impact in terms of how policing is being done. And the clear picture is the recent crime stats that were released by the minister today. And furthermore, it is our strong belief that the re-establishment of the specialized units like murder and robbery, they will clearly look into the modus operandi that deals, you know, that is involved with a higher murder rate that we can see. Those cases, these people, they specialize in it. And even the robberies, we can see the cash in transits, also they are out of control. So the re-establishment of specialized units, they will also ensure that they give focus to those specific crimes in order for them to make arrests and and get convictions in court in order to remove the perpetrators away from our society, for them to go through rehabilitation within the correctional services.
Mpo?
We are continuing where we have left in the last quarter. I think South Africans have gone through very harrowing, or they've seen harrowing experiences of crime that has taken place within their families, on the streets, and public spaces where they are supposed to be occupying as people who want peace, people who want to live in a country that provides security to their lives and properties. Today we see the continuation of the same problem that we have experienced last time. It is clear that those that are in the helms of policing are unable to change the situation. And if there is any time that this situation is going to change, we as the Independent Policing Union of South Africa do not believe that those that are in the helm of policing today have got the capacity to can do so. I want South Africans to note that regardless of the stats today indicating that there is a decrease in rape, 11,000 people whose rights have been violated by these criminals. 11,000 lives of men and women who have been raped by the criminals whom they come face to face with. What I've been taught as a cop is that a person who is dangerous is not a person that is dead. The person that is dead, we will all remain complaining about how they died and all that. But people who are raped are walking the streets of South Africa today. They are coming face to face with those people who have raped them. This should be a shame for those who are leading SABC today. And they should wake up and smell the coffee and say, I am unable to do this job. I think I need to give it to someone else to lead this so that South Africans get what they are supposed to be getting from the South African Police Service.
Well, those at the helm, as you call them, don't seem prepared to, accept that they are not doing a good job, and they are even dismissing suggestions that their little fights are actually compromising the police's ability to fight crime and keep the country safe. Take a listen to what they had to say today about their infighting.
I think continuously we're working together to deal with the crime, which does not mean that time does not come where we see things differently. Yes, indeed, it would be fine to deal with those things privately if we can, but to say we will have to see things in the same way all the time and agree, I think that would be fake working relationships.
And when things are clarified, nothing is personal and nothing is about anyone. It's more about SABC and it's more about the country. And we put the country's interest at heart. And I also want to further indicate that, as the minister explains, to me, from a career corps perspective, he always remains the minister no matter what he says and what he do. And from a discipline's point of view, I can never disrespect him.
Let's say, well, how do your members feel about what has been going on between these two gentlemen?
It is clear with what transpired in Parliament. Come on, we are referring to the highest body of the country, those who are the custodians of the Constitution, where those allegations were made by the minister about the National Commissioner. Clearly, SABC, it is a command and control environment whereby, the one who is in charge, that will be the National Commissioner, he has to give marching orders. So it is our strong belief to say those utterances were misplaced. If those allegations were there, they were not supposed to be expressed, publicly, more even especially in Parliament. And we strongly believe that this itself, it brings members to undermine the National Commissioner. But with them having said what they said today, what we believe as a union is that it is about time that the president comes and really intervene within this issue happening between the National Commissioner and the Police Minister, because we've been raising this issue for a long time, that when the two bulls are fighting, clearly the grass will suffer, and the grass, it will be our members who are out there, where you happen to have cabals between the generals, because some are siding with the minister, some are siding with the National Commissioner. But it is the prerogative of the president, clearly, to see what is it that he has to do, because he is the employer of both the National Commissioner and the Police Minister. But moreover, we strongly believe as a union that the regulations or even the law does not make a provision where if both the National Commissioner and the Minister do not agree on a certain issue, it does not make a provision for an arbiter to come in between. So that is why we made these submissions to the Portfolio Committee that there should be a retired judge who comes in between to resolve issues that are happening that may arise. Like an example, now in the Northern Cape, we don't have a provincial commissioner, clearly because the National Commissioner could not agree with the Premier there. So the issue of politics as well, it also gets involved. But if there's an arbiter who can come in and ensure that he bring both parties together so that they may find one another at the end of the day, we wouldn't be having a situation like this. But moreover, the President, he is responsible, as he is empowered by the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, to come in between and see what action he's going to take between what happens between the minister. But our members, clearly, they need to get to be given leadership at all times, because it is a command and control environment.
Okay, Paul?
Look, our members are keen to do their job. These are professional people who have been trained to service South Africans. Servamas et servimas. We serve and we protect. We don't want to get involved in the politics that they are busy doing now. We are concerned about the lives and properties of ordinary citizens. We are concerned about the interest of the state. The interest of the state is to ensure that South Africans, their lives and their properties are protected at all times. We don't have any provisions in law which allows for any intervention if one of the two is not performing. If the National Commissioner of Police is not performing, the President has the prerogative to remove such an incumbent. That is why incumbents at that position are employed in terms of 5-year contracts. If you don't do good, and there are issues which the President wants to know or South Africans need to know, he can only establish a commission of inquiry to look at the fitness of that incumbent to hold office. We don't have any other rule that really tries to want to seek or address the problem that we have today. The President has indicated to South Africans that he's going to make changes. Those changes must take place now. We can't wait any longer. Those things should not be prolonged any longer. South Africans want peace. They want to enjoy their rights. Their rights, the freedom of movement, the freedom of speech, the freedom to do anything that they want to do in a country of their own. And the police duty is to ensure that South Africans enjoy this.
Well, let's hope that the President is going to act sooner rather than later and deal with all these problems all of you who spoke today raised, from, the dealing with the people at the helm, the Minister and the Commissioner, dealing with the murders of police officers, dealing with the bloated top structure of the police, the mental state of our men and women in blue, the suicides that some of them end up committing. All these things need the urgent attention of those in charge, starting with the President. Let's close off with views from people who have been watching. Sillo saying, Vuyo, it's clear that we have a failed state of policing in South Africa. Numbers don't lie. Let's see if we can squeeze another one. There are more security companies in South Africa that employ foreigners, while SABC cannot recruit South Africans. It's not possible to fight crime while citizens are being ignored by the ANC government. Some of the comments coming from people who've been watching this program, which has now come to an end. Do join us again next Monday, 8 p.m. sharp. Have a good night and a great weekend.